So in today's session, I'm going to introduce what is Linux. Okay. So we are going to discuss about Linux operating systems and what we are going to use in this 10 sessions. Okay. We'll talk about all that in today's session. So like I have said earlier, you can put all your questions in the chat. Sometimes I'm not going to always check into the chat section, but for sure, all your questions will be answered. Okay. Right. Now, what is Linux? We can put it in the chat. So for the questions, what I'm going to ask, right? So I asked, what is Linux? So normally, if I ask these questions to everyone, normally I'll get a response saying that Linux is an operating system. Okay. But I'll not say that Linux is an operating system. So I'll give a different definition. So it is a kernel of operating system. See, if you are searching in internet about Linux, for sure you get the responses. Linux is an operating system. Obviously, yeah, that is also right. I'll come to that. But very deep. Okay, so I'm saying that Linux is a kernel of operating system. Okay. Now, so for sure everybody knows about operating system, right? So right. So in our home, so we use computing devices like desktop, laptop. Yeah, obviously there are other computing devices, but mostly, right, for our use, we use desktops, laptops, right? And these are machines. So we as an end user, if we want to interact with the machine, right? If we want to interact with the machine, that machine needs operating system, right? So machine, assume this is a hardware. Yeah, this is also a hardware. Above the hardware, you need operating system. Yeah, I'll come to this definition, right? Yeah. So for sure, everybody might have used operating systems. There is Microsoft, they have developed their own operating system called Windows. See, even I'm using it. So this is my desktop. In my desktop, I have Windows operating system installed, right? Very similarly, there is Apple, they have their own operating system called Mac, right? And very similarly, so the one which you are going to learn, Linux, it is also, right? Like I said, if you are searching for definition, you get answer like it is an operating system. But I said it is a kernel, right? Okay, now let's talk what is kernel. So whatever may be the operating system, in a hardware, whether it is a desktop or it is a laptop or it is a server, which is a powerful computer used in enterprises, whatever may be the operating system, that operating system will have a very important program called kernel. Okay. So just imagine this circle, assume this is an operating system. Okay. So when we download operating system, maybe from the people who develop the operating system, so normally we download as a single file. See, let me show you. So in my machine, right? So within this folder, I have few operating systems. So it is a single file, right? So even though we download it as a single file, but it's not a single file. So it is with millions of codes. Okay, so millions of codes, maybe lots of program integrated together. So it's not again developed by a single person. So normally operating systems will be developed by thousands or more than that people. Okay, so in a collaborative way, they develop these types of operating systems. So I'm just asking you to assume this as an operating system. So in this operating system, you have lot of program. So I'll just put few rounds, okay, round symbols. So assume these are all programs. Okay, I'm not filling it. Okay, but just consider these are all lot of programs. Now, among all the thousands of programs within the operating system, this kernel is actually core program of operating system. That program also will have a lot of sub programs. Okay. All right. So I'm saying kernel is a core program of operating system. Right? Yeah. So I'll again start from the beginning. So I asked what is Linux because we are going to see about that for the 10 session. We are going to use it. We are going to type a lot of commands. But you want to have a very strong foundational knowledge on Linux. So that's what I gave a definition saying that Linux is a kernel of operating system. So everybody knows about operating system. There are a lot, right? Whatever may be the operating system, that operating system will have a very important program that is called kernel. See, I'm not saying all operating system has Linux as kernel. Microsoft's operating system, Windows, will have their own kernel. Apple's Mac operating system will have their own kernel. Very similarly, the operating system, which I'm going to discuss little later, okay, those operating system has Linux as the kernel. Have you understood? You can say yes or no in the chat, or yeah, you can, if you have any questions, just put it on the chat. Okay. Okay. Right. So hope you have understood what is kernel. Now, continuing to this definition, so it is actually developed in 1991 by a person called Linus Torvalds. Okay. So this core program, which is in our session, we are talking about Linux. So this core program is actually developed by the person called Linus Torvalds. I'm saying Linus Torvalds, he didn't develop the entire operating system. So he just developed the core program. Now, I'll compare this with one more example. Okay. So let's say I'm just going to compare the operating system with the car. Okay. So this car has a lot of components, right? Very similarly, operating system has a lot of programs. In this car, which is the very important component, so the engine is considered as the very important component, right? Very similarly, in operating system, kernel is considered like an engine. Okay. So this person, Linus Torvalds, he actually developed only the engine, not the operating system. So, which means Linus Torvalds developed the kernel, not the complete car, which means not the complete operating system. Okay. But he made this kernel as open source. Okay. So now the next question is, what is open source? So when you're working in technology, for sure, you might have come across the term open source a lot. There is lots of open source softwares available. Now, what is open source? Okay, so I'm getting some answers like it's free. Open source doesn't mean it is free. Okay. So open source means the source code is openly available. Okay, we understood. So if you read again this definition one more time, see, I actually explained part by part, right? So if you read this definition one more time, so you'll perfectly understand what is Linux. No. So I said it is a kernel of operating system developed in 1991 by a person called Linus Torvalds as open source. So it's not the operating system, it's the core program of operating system. I compared it with a car, so it's like engine of a car. And I said it is made as open source. Then I asked what is open source. I said open source means the source code is openly available. So which means the person who developed this kernel, he made the source code openly available, which means anybody can see this. Anybody can see this code. Even we can see this code. Okay. So I'll take you to a website. Maybe if you go to kernel.org. Okay, so this is the website where you can see the Linux kernel. Initially, it was developed by Linus Torvalds, but now it's not developed by only Linus Torvalds. So millions of developers across the globe, lot of companies across the globe, collaboratively, they are contributing towards the development of this Linux kernel. We understood. Which means, so this Linux kernel, initially it was developed by a single person because he made it available openly in the internet. Because it's called open source, anybody can contribute towards the development of this kernel. Anybody can contribute, or anybody can download the kernel. Okay. So anybody can contribute, anybody can download. But unlike other operating systems, so like Windows, Mac, so those operating system also will have kernel. That is not Linux. Okay. Those kernels are made only by that particular vendor. It's closed source. They will have copyright. That source code is not editable. It means if someone somehow finds the code and if they try to modify Microsoft's kernel or Apple's kernel, right? So Microsoft or Apple have proper permission to take legal action against them. Have you understood? So which means those operating system and its kernel are closed source, but this Linux kernel is open source. It's openly available. Like I said, so it's available in kernel.org. And all the source code is available in this path. Okay. Right. See, even I can download it. So now if I click on this download button, so you can see it is getting downloaded around 130 MB of a zipped file. Okay. right? Am I going to do anything with this? No, right? So I am not going to do anything with it. It's like I just have only the engine of the car. So if you only have the engine, you can't do anything. You should have the complete part, right? Only then you can able to use it. Very similarly, I just downloaded the engine, right? Doesn't mean I can use it. So if I am a developer who can develop operating system, right? Maybe if I have a bigger team, I can add lot of other code to it. I can add lot of other programs to it, and I can develop operating system. Have you understood? And nobody is going to ask why you have used that kernel. Have you understood? Right. So again, so if you have any questions about open source, can put it on the chat. Yes. So I said open source doesn't mean free, right? Earlier, obviously this Linux kernel is free. Okay, but not all open source softwares available is free. Okay. Now, so now let's talk about the operating system available. See, because it's freely available, I just downloaded, but I said for me it's not going to be useful because I'm not going to develop operating system with it. But so who have developed operating system? That's what we are going to talk now. Okay. So there is a lot of companies across the globe and lot of communities. Communities means group of people. So they have used this Linux kernel developed by Linus Torvalds, and they have added a lot of programs to it, and they made a complete operating system. Okay, right? Which means, so I said anybody can contribute towards the development of Linux, or anybody can download it and build operating system with it, right? Now, I'll list few operating system names. Okay, up to this we were talking about Linux kernel or Linux. Okay, now we are going to talk about the operating systems. Using this Linux kernel, lot of companies and communities have made operating system. I know there are more than 400 plus Linux operating systems available, but I'm not going to write all 400 here. I can't, and I don't even know about all those things. But I list few operating system names here. Okay, right. So directly from the Linux kernel, there is a community called Debian. Okay, so Debian is actually a community. Community means group of people, group of developers, maybe from different companies or maybe like from different environment. They used the source code of Linux, which is the kernel developed by Linus Torvalds, and they added a lot of program to it, and they made an operating system called Debian. Okay, now we can call this Debian as a Linux operating system. Have you understood? So now I said it is not an operating system earlier, right? I said Linux is not an operating system, but if you ask which is Linux, which is the operating system, okay, so you need to know that whatever operating system developed from the Linux kernel, we can call it as Linux operating system. Have you understood? So Debian is a community. They have used the source code of Linux and they added a lot of program to it and they made an operating system called Debian. Okay. See, we can call as operating system. Some people will call it as distribution. Distro, in short, distros or flavors. Okay, whatever may be the name, it means operating system. Okay, right. So which means the first operating system which I have explained in this session is Debian. Okay, Debian is the Linux operating system. Okay, right. Very similarly, directly from the Linux kernel, there is a operating system called Slackware. Okay. And very similarly, directly from the kernel, there is a company called Red Hat. Okay, so Red Hat is a company. They have used the Linux kernel, and with their developers, they have added a lot of programs to it, and they made an operating system with the name called Red Hat. Okay. Actually, later they renamed it to Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Okay, so in short, it is called RHEL. Okay, right. Now, what are all these three names? Debian, Slackware, Red Hat. So these three are Linux operating systems. And why they are called Linux operating system? Because these operating systems have Linux as the kernel. Okay. Now, see, these are not the only three operating system directly developed from Linux kernel. I know there are a lot, but I haven't listed. Even the operating system which is running on most number of devices across the globe, so which is Android, that is also developed from Linux kernel. Okay, right. That's not made for desktops or laptops or for servers. It's for mobile phones, tablets, Android TVs, right? So for that, have you understood? Okay, now see, little earlier I was saying Linux kernel is open source, right? Now I'm saying one more thing. So these companies or communities, whoever developed the complete operating system, for example, Red Hat, they took the code from Linux store walls and they added a lot of programs to it and they made the complete operating system as open source. Have you understood? Little earlier, I was saying that Linux is open source, which is the kernel is open source, but now I'm saying even the entire operating system is open source. Have you understood? Which means now it's again easier for other companies and other communities. So instead of directly using the source code of kernel developing complete operating system, so what they can do, they can use this source code of Debian and they can develop again another operating system. Have you understood? Again, I'm going to give you a few more operating system names which I know, which was developed from these operating systems. Okay, right. Debian is an operating system which is also open source. From Debian, there is a very popular operating system called Ubuntu. Okay. So Ubuntu is a Linux operating system because it has Linux kernel, but it was actually developed from the source code of Debian operating system. Have you understood? Right. From Slackware, there are again a lot of operating systems, but there is an operating system called SUSE Enterprise. That is a popular Slackware based operating system. Okay. Again, from Red Hat, which means from the source code of Red Hat, there are a lot of operating system and there are a lot of popular operating systems as well. So Oracle, they have developed their own operating system called Oracle Enterprise Linux. In short, it's called OEL. Okay, which was developed from the source code of Red Hat. Have you understood? And very recently, once after the advancement of cloud, so Amazon, they have their own operating system called Amazon Linux, right? So which is also derived or which is also developed from the source code of Red Hat. Okay, and there is many more like CentOS, which is popularly used in enterprises. Okay, which was developed by a community. Okay, so it's called Community Enterprise Operating System. So hope this is clear. So if you have any questions, again, like you can put it on the chat. So Unix is not Linux. So even before 1991, okay, even before 1991, I said operating system where exist, right? So like Windows exists before that, Unix exists before that, right? So see here, I have given around 6 to 8 operating system names, and all these operating systems are Linux operating systems or Linux distributions, Linux distro or Linux flavors. Okay, because all these operating systems have Linux as the core program. Now, the operating system which I listed here, mostly these operating system which I listed are not made for running on our desktops or laptops, even though it is possible to install it in our desktops or laptop, but it's not mainly made for desktops or laptops. The one which I have listed, it's mainly for powerful computers called servers used in enterprises. Okay. So obviously there is Ubuntu. For example, let's check about that. So if I go to Ubuntu's website, actually Ubuntu is very recently managed by a company called Canonical. Now if you go here to download section, for Ubuntu, you can see both Ubuntu desktop as well as Ubuntu server. So from the Linux kernel, so they have developed both Ubuntu for desktops and Ubuntu for servers. Okay. But most of the operating systems which I have listed, these are not made for running on personal computers. Okay. But there are operating systems like Ubuntu desktop, Fedora, right? Fedora workstation. Okay. Right. So these are made for running on desktops, laptops. Okay. So now, see here, I told you there are more than 400 plus, right? So now I'll take you to a, okay, so I'll search it as, I'll take you to a Wikipedia page. I'll search it as so Linux distribution. See, up to this for around half an hour, I'm explaining this one line. Okay, seriously, we have spent half an hour, but I was just explaining this one line. Okay, so I'll take you to this page. Now, if you read this definition, you may perfectly understand. So a Linux distribution, often abbreviated as distro. So distribution in short is called distro, I said, which is nothing but an operating system made from software collection, which means a lot of softwares, right, tightly integrated, including the Linux kernel, right? That's what I'm right saying. I understood. So that is actually called Linux distribution. Now, I was giving you a few operating system name, right, around 8. But if you visit this page, and here you can see timeline of development of main Linux distribution. So which means you can see lot of names here in this image. Okay, I'll click on that. All those names actually they are operating systems. Okay, different operating systems made for different reasons. Not all Linux operating systems are popular. Maybe few operating systems in this list are used either in home or in enterprises. Okay. Yeah, now let's go to this image. Okay, so yeah, I need to zoom this. Okay, so I'll click here. So you can see the timeline. So give me a minute. Okay. So you can see a timeline after 1992, maybe right till 2023. I told you Linux kernel was developed in 1991. After that, different companies and different communities, they used the source code and they developed various Linux operating systems. And in this page, whatever names you're seeing, these are all different operating systems. Okay. Even I don't really know all these names and I haven't really used all these operating systems. Okay. Yeah. So if you scroll down, you can see Slackware, right? I mentioned little earlier, right? From Slackware, so there is SUSE Enterprise. Okay. And there are a lot of other operating systems. Okay. So these are all operating system names. Okay. Right. And again, scrolling down, you can see Debian, right? So because Debian is open source, there are a lot of Debian based operating systems are here in this list. Okay. So there are a lot of popular operating systems like maybe Kali Linux used in enterprises for penetration testing. Okay. Then here you have Ubuntu, which is a Debian based operating system. Okay. And there are a lot. Okay. And again, scrolling down, okay, you can see Red Hat. I said, again, it is directly developed from the Linux kernel by the company called Red Hat. Later, it became Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And by using the source code, a lot of other companies and communities, they developed their own operating system like Oracle Enterprise, CentOS, okay, then Scientific Linux, Fedora, right? So maybe if I scroll to the right, very recently, some operating systems are used in enterprises like Alma, Rocky, right? Okay, so these are all operating systems developed from the source code of Red Hat. Have you understood? And again, scrolling down, there are many directly developed from Linux kernel. I'm not going through it. Maybe you can visit this page later. And scrolling down to the very bottom, there you will see Android as well. Okay. Right. So hope you have perfectly understood what is Linux, what is kernel, what is open source, and some of the Linux distributions, right, which I have explained, right? Okay, so any questions? Have you learned something useful? Okay. So here, in our next sessions, in our upcoming session, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one operating system. Okay. So I'm going to use Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Okay. So I'm going to download from the official website. It is free. Okay. You can download it and we can use it for testing. Right. For the next 9 sessions, I'm going to use Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Right. I'll install it and show you that. And with this operating system, I'm going to teach you all these basics. Okay. So I recommend you to spend, other than this 1 hour training session, so you need to spend another 1 hour for reading related to it. And maybe if you are able to practice along with me, so for sure it is going to be helpful. You will get confidence working in the command line of Linux right? Maybe in your enterprise. So, right. Now, finally, I'll tell you what I'm going to do in the upcoming session, which means tomorrow. So I'm going to install Red Hat Enterprise Linux. But so this Red Hat Enterprise Linux is mainly made for running on powerful server, but I can't show you installing it on a server. And I'm not even going to replace my existing operating system and install Red Hat Enterprise Linux in my desktop, right? Which means we need to use some technology to install this operating system, okay? So I'm going to use virtualization. See, in tomorrow's session, in next session, I'll tell you what is, I'll teach you what is virtualization and how to create a virtual machine and how to install this Red Hat Enterprise Linux in our laptop or desktop itself. Maybe you can use it for your practice. Okay. Yeah, so I'll give permission now to unmute yourself. Maybe if you have any questions, you can ask. Okay.